That was the moment where I was like, that's what I want to do. This is the SRV Theory Podcast.
So, Alan, tell me a little bit about the first time you knew you wanted to play guitar.
There's so many things that kind of precipitated that. I started out with art. That's the very first thing I can remember. There was always music throughout the house. There was always music playing. My father had these big, huge speakers that he kind of jimmy rigged together, and he always played music. Always. He played everything from Banda Blanca, which is a orchestra band basically from Honduras, and he would play everything from that to James Brown and funk kind of stuff. Led Zeppelin, he would play Hendrix, he would play all kind of music. I hadn't discovered the guitar yet, but there was that precedent that was already set. Then one night, I was asleep. My mom and dad, they had the TV on and they were doing chores at night or something. And PBS was on, and the famous TV show Austin City Limits. It's one of the biggest TV shows, music TV shows in the world. My mom and dad, I think both of them were in the kitchen, and they heard this guitar playing, but it wasn't quite. It was Hendrix, but it sounded a little bit different, almost with a little something added. And they were like, "Who is that?" And they immediately caught their attention, and my mom or dad or whoever, which one of them, they went to the TV. They saw this skinny white guy with a blue kimono, wide brim black hat, scarf, Stratocaster, and it was Stevie Ray Vaughan. And from that day forward, they were so excited that they had to show me. My sister was too little at the time. And this was around 1999, because that's when the retrospective episode came out about Stevie. So the very next day, my dad went to work. So there were two things that were happening. My dad was working at the flea market. He was friends with everybody. And he got cassette tapes of Stevie Ray Vaughan. And he got as many as he could. He Couldn't Stand the Weather, Greatest Hits. And then on the other side, over here, my mom is going, "Hey, AJ," that was my nickname when I was a kid. She took me to Borders, and she picked up, once again, as many albums as she could, CDs at the time. And it was Blues at Sunrise, and took it home. And I listened to it, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's cool, yeah." Then she got a VHS tape. It's called Pride and Joy, and it's all 7 of Stevie Ray Vaughan's music videos. And we popped it in the VCR, and the very first music video was Love Struck Baby. And to see Stevie walk in, Double Trouble was at the bar. Tommy and Chris are at the bar. They're kind of hanging out, smoking a cigarette. And then Stevie walks in, and he throws open those tavern doors, walks in like a gunslinger almost. And then they slam right into Love Struck Baby. You gotta imagine being an 8-year-old kid, seeing that for the first time. And that was the moment where I was like, that's what I want to do.
That is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, that was basically it. And then from there, first guitar was a set of Lego blocks.
Tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, they're like the Mega Bloks, I think they were called. I kind of made a cigar box guitar. And so I made the body, then a set of Mega Bloks was the neck, and then I would just mime, like this. And then during Third Son from the Sun, the El Macambo VHS in particular, which, by the way, if any of you listeners out there haven't seen the El Macambo performance, you are about to get your mind blown, because I watched that VHS until it wore out, and then we had to go out and buy the DVD. I think I've shown you the video before. He takes the guitar by the whammy bar and he's doing this on the floor, flipping it around and standing on it. And I imitated all that with the Lego blocks. And then I remember in our living room, I took it by like here, and then the Lego blocks fell apart. And I was just kind of like, oh well. But that's how it started.
So what was it like to elevate just the regular air guitar with Legos?
It was absolutely amazing.
That's pretty impressive, I must say.
I mean, that's just,
I think it shows your ingenuity because, most kids would copy other kids playing air guitar or something else, which was very popular in the 90s, but
right.
Especially with the video games out. But you actually built your guitar and then played it. So I think that ties in a lot to what you currently are very handy at, and that's making a really good guitar sound really good.
Well, I appreciate that. Keep it coming. I appreciate that. And certainly you've seen me play so many times over the years. And there's times where I still think about that. I still think about those early days, And KB Toys made toy guitars. They were in Barney colored purple. And it was all plastic, So like the neck was like gray colored and it had red fret inlay markers. The strings were like a mile off the fretboard. It was a challenge to play, but I made it work. And then it came with this little tiny speaker amplifier, if you will, and it had like a little plastic volume knob, and you would put a mic stand in it. It came with a microphone, and I would stand there 8, 9 years old, shy, and putting concerts on in our living room. And then back here would be our big TV, and then we would have Stevie playing, and I would just stand next to him and play along to the whole concert. And that's how it started. And
that wasn't a short concert.
No. That is like at least an hour long, at least.
So you must have had some flashbacks when last year during World Narcolepsy Day, you helped PWN launch their anthem, because there was a bunch of play guitars in there and even stuffed ones.
It's a very good parallel, actually, now that you mention it, because that was the perfect training when I was a kid. Obviously, when you watch him, I mean, he's got such a stage presence. And certainly he was that first guy that I watched, for stage presence. That's who I took my cues from for the most part. Those bleed over into other things like the Beyond the Sleep music video. And certainly with my own band, Beggars and Poets, there was a lot of that we did. We did a lot of miming, One of our videographers would be over here with their big truck, big speaker system, and they would be blasting it from across the field. Yeah, great memories. I just kind of wanted to ask you, this may be a hard question, but because not everybody is into blues music or classic rock or jazz or anything like that. So just out of curiosity, like, what is it about my guitar playing that's attractive to you?
Well, it takes it back strictly to the music. So I would say for most of my life, when I listened to music, it was always for the words, the lyrics, and all of that. Even though I did play in band, I played the flute, I played the piano, I played the French horn of all things. Could also play a little bit of my brother's clarinet. But orchestra music to me was always different because my mom loved classical music. However, my dad loved Hank Williams Sr. So,
oh, yeah.
But I also grew up in the South where it was either alternative or rap and R&B. So there wasn't very many choices, I guess. And so I usually tended to go towards songs that I identify with the lyrics or it made me feel something a certain way. It never really focused on the music. And it wasn't until we met that I started actually listening for the sound of the guitar and the music, not the entire song as a whole.
Yeah. So, here's the crazy part. When we had this old 1979 Dodge Aspen that was an absolute nightmare of an automobile, but it had a cassette player, and I would be in the back seat. My dad would pop in whatever Stevie Ray Vaughan cassette, and I would be in the back, going actually singing it with my mouth before I even picked up a guitar. So what I'm saying is, back then, of course, I was listening for the guitar parts. Everything else came second, the drums and the bass. But as I got older and I started my gigging career, when I was 12 years old, I played with some of the best musicians in the world, and I played in band settings, and played with all older guys for the most part. And over the years, there's two types of listening. There's passive listening, which means, like you were saying, listening to the song as a whole. But then there's also active listening. So you're actively listening for, let's say, a drum fill or something like that. Yeah, I mean, that's a great example.
It's like trying to think back. What was the question again?
Sorry. I went off on a tangent there. What I asked was, what attracts you to my guitar playing? Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious about that because, not everybody has the same taste. And I always like to hear another person's point of view. And more specifically, in those worship settings that...
Well, with those, that was a bit different than when every time I see you play, you've got that star quality because your passion just shows through. It's not like, is Alan good at something? You just have to watch him and you know that he's good at it. But it's really just your strong faith and conviction, which most people won't know that just seeing you on stage. But that I know about you personally, that just shows me that your purpose with God is through music, and you're putting it out there, whether it's worship music, creating new frameworks, doing different things. And that's something that I don't see that much anymore.
I'm going to get long-winded here in a second, but you'll find this fascinating. Right over there on my bookshelf, I have Stevie Ray Vaughan, Day by Day, Night After Night, which is written by the great Craig Hopkins. He is an archivist. He's made friends with the Vaughan family since Stevie passed away. And he started the Stevie Ray Vaughan fan club back in the 90s. He took people on tours of, the statue, Stevie Ray Vaughan's childhood home, the Vaughan brothers' childhood home. And he wrote that book after years and years of research and collecting concert tickets and concert programs and contracts and all that stuff. Anyway, at the very back of the book, he dives into why Stevie Ray Vaughan was so great. And one of the things he says is that back in the 50s and the 60s and even the 70s, young kids, they didn't have iPads, they didn't have iPhones, they didn't have Xbox, they didn't have Wii, they didn't have computers even. All they had was the radio and a TV and maybe a record player. That's all they had. And it was either one of two things. Either you go learn an instrument or you play sports. And especially in Texas, you got the Longhorns and the Cowboys and big sports state. And Jimmy Vaughan, he broke his collarbone trying to play football when he was 12 years old or something like that. So after that, Big Jim Vaughan, the father, he went out to a family friend of his and got an acoustic guitar, and he goes, "Here, do something with this." And Jimmy Vaughan, it was like he'd been playing all his life. And then Stevie soon followed. So what I'm saying is it's getting to be a lost art of just doing what I did around the area that I grew up. I mean, no kid my age was going to sit down for 6 hours a day and learn the same lick 1,000 times. It goes back to, if you really want to do something, you're going to do it. And that's one thing I really wanted, was to master. It's been a goal of mine ever since I was very young. I always wanted to master everything. And then once I mastered it, then I got curious about other things. I got curious about, how did Stevie make it sound like this? Why does it sound this way? How could it sound this way? Imagine this, Jane. Imagine being a 10-year-old kid. You're in your bedroom for all hours of the day, and you're looking up schematics of a Fender amp to find out why this amp sounded the way it did. It's just crazy. And it's crazy for me to think about even now. I was like...
Well, that's definitely impressive. I know with me writing an simulated artificial intelligence program in 6th grade that my teacher failed me on.
How dare she?
One of those things. And this was back in the earlier 90s.
You always tell that story, and it always boggles my mind. Like, maybe she was just jealous. Who knows?
I think she really didn't understand the computer, to be totally honest. Because you have to remember, the town I grew up in was only about 4,000 in size back then.
That is true. So what you're saying is that you and I are a rare breed of intelligence, just in different ways.
We have, it doesn't mean that only opposites attract.
Yeah. I have to say that it really means a lot that certainly your support for SRV Theory and my support for what you're doing with PWN, that's why we get along so well, I think, is we always have our passions to come back to.
That's true.
What would you say your absolute favorite memory was when you were a little girl?
I guess I can't plead the fifth on this, right? I would have to say one of my proudest moments. So let's go with proud. It's hard to pick favorites. So I was about 10 or 11 years old, and I had been helping my dad. He was a carpenter painter on his side jobs. Everything from tearing down wallpaper that was like 16 sheets deep to scraping off paint to sweeping up, what have you. And my dad kept bragging to everybody that I was such a good helper. And I wasn't like his other helpers who might show up drunk or not on time or other things or smoke too much. And I just remember I was in the living room with my mom and dad, and we lived in a single-wide trailer at the time. And Dad, of course, was bragging about me again to Mom about how good of a job I did that day. And so I said, well, Daddy, if I did such a good job, why don't I get paid the same amount that you paid the other men? So, I was a very outspoken child my entire life. But my mom looked over at him and she was like, well, she's absolutely right. And so from then on, I was being paid like $5 an hour. I started getting paid like $12 an hour, like the rest of the people.
So that was like the spark that started, your sales career.
Kind of. A couple of years earlier, kind of started that more. My dad, who would receive these massive handouts at the orphanage, we would go for extra money because we were very poor. We'd take them down to the flea market and sell them. And my dad would we would show up with a truck full of stuff, unpile it, and then he just let me sell everything. And I literally would sell everything on the plot. And I'm talking comforters to books to just random stuff. I would get it all sold so we didn't have anything to take back.
I didn't learn anything about sales really until I was in the band, because of course when you're in a band, I mean, it's a business. technically it's a business, and you don't really learn those things. You learn things as you go. I certainly had to learn things as you go. But there's certain events in your life, I think, where you do something not even realizing you're doing it, especially when you're a kid. You do things just because. And I think the spark with the guitar, your spark with knowing how to sell stuff, that's not an easy feat. I've seen people try to sell stuff, and it's like, it's just weird, the way they do it. And I think you've helped me realize that sales, it's not only, hi, how you doing today? Would you like to try a butterscotch? It's not, it's just having kind of like what we're having now is a conversation.
Exactly.
And if people like you, of course, not everybody's going to like you.
But people buy from people they like.
Right. And you're always going to have one that's like, I'm not sure, they're indifferent. But it's just having a conversation. And if you attract them the right way, then you make a sale, And it's kind of like with my Texas Flood Tone Lab, Even to this day, I'm still getting messages saying, hey, what would you recommend this and that for this guitar? And it's crazy, And am I a salesman? No. But do I have salesman-like qualities? Yeah. And certainly, I'm being very honest when I say that you've certainly been quite an influence on me as far as that goes. And for a long time, I never felt like I could do salesy stuff. It took me a very long time, to come into my own. Not everybody grows up having confidence and being brought up with confidence. I was brought up to be very insecure, and I was brought up with a lot of guilt and a lot of shame, especially from my father and stuff. But over time, it's morphed into who I am today, which is you can do this if you really want to. If you want something bad enough, you go after it. And I think that's a quality that both you and I have.
I agree.
Jane, thank you for being here and having this talk with me. It really means a lot. Your support for SRV Theory means the whole world to me.
You do such a great job. I don't have to explain, how good you are. People can see that for themselves. But I have always been impressed with your work ethic. And there's not many people that have that these days.
Well, for a long time, I just did what was good enough, which there's nothing wrong with that. But it's not coming from a place of security. It's coming from a place of insecurity. You can play guitar, you can do audio, you can work at a church, for one day a week. That's all I was doing, for 10 years, was just getting by every day. And of course that had a lot to do with my alcohol addiction. It was just a matter of time. And one of the things I promised myself when I got clean and sober was I'm going to do the very best I can to succeed and not slack off with anything.
And that you have. SRV Theory, Firefly Sound Labs, even your own AlanBerryBush.com.
Yeah. And I see everything you're doing, and it's always an inspiration. Again, I thank you for doing this with me. This is Alan from SRV Theory, and I wish you all a good day. This is the SRV Theory Podcast.